Howdy Who fans, and welcome to the Big Blue Box podcast. My name's Gary, and welcome to episode 240.
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow, so the TARDIS should be free of the force field now.
You may be a doctor, but I'm the doctor. The definite article, you might say.
The trouble with time travel is, one never seems to find the time.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
I am the Doctor!
For now, for this moment, I am the Doctor again.
The ground beneath our feet is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and the entire planet is hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour, and I can feel it. We're falling through space, you and me.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
I could be a curator. I'd be great at curating. I'd be the great curator.
I could retire and do that. I'm the Doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years, and not all of them were good. I've made many mistakes, and it's about time that I did something about that.
Bit of adrenaline, dash of outrage, and a hint of panic knitted my brain back together. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe.
Howdy do Who fans. I hope you've all had a cracking good few weeks and that you've all managed to do something Doctor Who related. You may notice that it's just little old me this week. My good friend, your good friend, my good friend and my co-host, Mr. Adam, is currently still situated away from a microphone or a setup or anything like that, but essentially he's not at his usual routine and setup at the moment still, so it's going to be me giving you a slightly shorter show this week. Going to go through some news, a little bit of merch, and I don't really want to carry on doing the reviews and everything without my co-host, so I'm going to leave those for when he gets back, and we'll pick those back up when he's back recording again. So the last review that we did for you guys would have been The Mad Woman in the Attic, which was the latest Sarah Jane Smith or Sarah Jane Adventures episode that we did. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check that out. That's episode 239. That was a few weeks back. We were due to kick off with Classic Who the week afterwards, but that's obviously been delayed, and that was going to be, where are we? The Arc of Infinity, the 5th Doctor story. So we'll get to that when we come back in a couple, 2 or 3 weeks' time, when Adam's all sorted and we're back to doing that stuff. So because it's just me doing this stuff, I don't want to do those reviews without him, because his views and his thoughts and his score and everything is very important, as you might guess, to the show overall. So I'm going to do some other little cool snippets and stuff in his absence until he gets back. This week I've opened up a Q&A session. Haven't done one of those in ages and ages. So thank you so much, guys, for sending in all your questions. I've got them all logged here. I'll get through to those after we've done the news and merch. Quick update on the show. As you can obviously guess from the opening of this show and some of the tweets that have gone out the last couple of weeks, we are sort of having a little bit of a on and off kind of break at the moment throughout the summer, because our personal circumstances changed recently, and Adam's going through a few things and all that stuff. So it just means that the show is kind of up and down at the moment. There's no regular schedule, but that will be back in the next few weeks. So hopefully by towards the end of September. So there's a few more weeks to go through of doing some cool stuff. I'm going to get some co-hosts on that you've may have heard of, may not have heard of before in the world of Doctor Who blogging and podcasting and so on, and some other cool bits. So that's why the show's a little bit up and down at the moment. But Just trust us. We'll be back to regular schedules and viewings by the end of September, and then we'll be cracking on with our schedule of reviews. And if there are any new listeners, if you've just joined the show, if you found us somewhere out on the interwebs or iTunes, whatever, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome aboard. If you don't know the schedule, we do a rotation every single month. So one week we do a classic Doctor Who story. The next week it's Sarah Jane. Then we do a modern Doctor Who story review, and then we do a Torchwood review. And as I said, the last one was Sarah Jane Ventures the Mad Woman in the Attic, which I think closed off series 2, I think. So when Adam's back, the next one we'll get round to is the 5th Doctor story, Arc of Infinity. And yeah, so I hope you guys have all been well. I've chatted to a bunch of you guys over Twitter and Instagram over the last few weeks. And I just hope you're keeping well. There isn't, I've got one piece of news to kick off with shortly. And as usual, it's a sad piece of news, very, very sad, this piece of news, which I'll come on to. And then there's a few cool pieces of merch, and then the Q&A. Normally on the show, Adam and myself will go through what we've both been up to over the past week in terms of anything Doctor Who related and so on. I haven't actually done too much, which I think is common at the moment for Doctor Who fans. I did see that a bunch of people were off to Hooverville last weekend, just gone. That looked really cool. So it's not a convention that I've been to before. I've heard good things about it. I think it's a fairly long running convention as well, but that's something I have to get to at some point. It does look like a cool convention. And then I also believe that we have Cardiff Comic Con this weekend. It was either, again, the weekend just gone or this weekend coming up. So we do still have a few conventions to keep us going, but there's very, very little in the way of official news or anything from the BBC about the show in general. So yeah, it's very, very quiet. I've not really been up to anything. The only thing I have done Doctor Who related is I was a guest on another podcast. So there's a really, really good podcast out there that's been going for years as well. It's called the Who's He podcast, and it's hosted and run by our good friend Phil Cannon, who also jumped on and revitalized the Doctor Who podcast that was on a huge break for years, and I think he co-hosts that once a month, I think. So anyway, I got the chance to jump on his show, and he invited me on to talk about our favourite companions, and I chose Donna Noble. So that show is coming out, I believe, this weekend. I think it's coming out this Sunday. So we'll stick a couple of links to that on Twitter and so on at the weekend when that comes out. But that was a really good chat with Phil. He's such a nice guy, Phil, and knows his Doctor Who and all that. And we had a really good time talking all things Donna Noble. So that's really cool. So I managed to do something Doctor Who related, which is not all bad. I've got a little bit of an update on the saga with the season 10 box set. Listeners who have been listening to the show more than a couple of months, I suppose, will know that I had a bit of a hoo-ha with the old season 10 Blu-ray box set that I'd ordered. Essentially, what happened was I pre-ordered the box set as you do, and what happened was I moved house in between me placing the pre-order and me moving house. What I did, I ordered it from zoom.co.uk, and I went on to Zoom and I changed my account details and updated my address and all that stuff. But it turns out that, and this might be a good tip for anyone that is moving or changing address or whatever, with Zoom, what you have to do is each individual order, you have to go in and update your details for that particular order for that to be changed as well. You can go into your overall account and change all your details, but I think it's something to do with the registered, whatever credit or debit card you paid with, it has to be registered to that address. So my card was obviously at my old address at the time, something to do with the order, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the order went out and I thought it was lost forever. I sent my in-laws round to the old house, the new owners, but they didn't see anything of it. So I just assumed it was lost. Those guys were just having a nice cup of tea, enjoying my season 10 Blu-ray. But it turns out that's not the case. So I got an email from Zoom beginning of last week, and they said, we've had a package arrive back at the warehouse. The courier has been unable to deliver it. So would you like us to redispatch it, or would you like a refund? So I thought, yes, the situation has been like the universe has listened. It's like it could sense my downtrodden, downbeat demeanor about not owning the season 10 Blu-ray, and the universe has served up a resolution and everything's lovely. But that didn't happen, unfortunately. So I emailed Zoom back and said, this is amazing news, because I assumed it was lost, or it went, because it went to my old address, even though they said that it wasn't there, blah, blah, blah. So I said, please dispatch it to my new address. Everything's hunky-dory. Goody gumdrops. I got an email from them a few days later saying, unfortunately, this item is no longer in the warehouse and we don't know where it is. So our only option is to give you a refund. Sad face once more. So the season 10 box set was eluding me. I basically resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to have to buy it again for a more expensive price, because I think the £35 or the £39 that it was out, the price for pre-order, there's no way that you'll be able to pick that up now. So I looked on Fleabay, I looked on loads of different stores, and the cheapest I could find it was, I think it was about £90, £95, which I thought was a bit steep, but I thought, well, I've pre-ordered the other seasons. I've got the Sixth Doctor season box set pre-ordered, and another one, which I'll come on to in the merch section. So I've got another 2 ordered, so I can't leave this one not there on the shelf. There'll be just a very sad, empty gap on the shelf. So I couldn't have that. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to suck it up and pay the extra beans for it. Anyway, doing a little bit more Googling around and searching, and I found our good old friends over at Phantom Events. So you might have heard myself and Adam over the years pop along to their little events, those tiny little conventions they do over in Chiswick in London. What they must have done is purchased a load of box sets and then asked some of the people at these conventions to sign them, and then they can sell them on as signed pieces. So that's what I did. I found they did 3 different versions. I think they did one signed by Katie Manning, another one signed by 4 cast members and something else. So I managed to pick up the box set signed by Katie Manning for £75. And that's, to be honest with you, a pretty good deal, because not only is it the cheapest price that I could find, but it's also signed. So every cloud and all that. So I'm eagerly awaiting the delivery of that. I can't wait to sit through and mainly watch a load of the special features and so on. So hopefully the Series 10 saga debacle, whatever, will be resolved fairly soon, and I can sit down with a cuppa and a slice of cake and enjoy that. So that's been me over the last few weeks. Like I said, not doing too much. So I think we should land the old TARDIS and do a wee bit of news. So, news, and it's sad news, really sad news this week. Over the course of doing this podcast, Adam and I are always just none too happy to kick off the news segment with sad news, and this one's a bit of a bummer because of this person's impact on Doctor Who for a long, long time. So Terrance Dicks, you'll all know that name immediately, hopefully, has sadly passed away at the age of 84. And I think this one's resonated quite deep throughout Doctor Who fandom for many reasons. The main one being that his name is just synonymous with Doctor Who storytelling and novelizations, and just being such a great influencer throughout the classic years of Doctor Who. It's a real it honestly feels like it's like a huge loss to the Doctor Who fandom, and just people that we've seen many contributors come and go over the years, and there's just a few people that, I don't know, just their name just brings a smile to your face whenever you're talking about their era of Doctor Who or what they've contributed to Doctor Who. And Terrance Dicks is one of those people, absolutely. And when I heard this news the other night, I was instantly just lost for words, really. I saw a lot of people putting out tweets and Facebook posts and so on, but I just couldn't do it for at least half an hour or so. I was just sat there thinking, well, this is just a crappy end, because I think the news broke in the evening, and I remember thinking, well, what a crappy end to the day this is, because it wasn't a great day anyway. And then this news broke and I was like, bummer. But it has left a big hole in just because of the sheer volume of stuff that he's churned out for Doctor Who. I mean, he was involved in other TV projects and so on, which were not as big or as famous as the world of Doctor Who, but he was very successful in those other things. But Doctor Who is the thing that he's known for, and he wrote, I think it was pushing up 40 episodes or something, or at least 40 episodes in the early 70s through to the early 80s. And then he took over as, he was a script editor for a chunk of that time as well. But he's often known as teaming up with Barry Letts in the 70s and steering the show into a direction that just spawned so many good stories in those classic years. And some of his stories they've just been really cool. So he's worked on The Seeds of Death, the War Games, which I think he wrote a lot with, was it Malcolm Hulke, I think? And then when he teamed up with Barry Letts, they just pretty much conquered all of television during that time. And so it's really, really sad news. And also, TV stuff aside, he also, like the amount of books that he's novelized from the classic years, all of the Target novelizations that he's done, I can't remember the exact number, but I think he's done over at least 50 Target books. So if you can just imagine that just for a second, and those Target books, although they're not the biggest books in the world in terms of page number or content, that's still a lot of books to write for anyone's career as a writer. So that's what I mean. Just his contribution and the volume of stuff that he's done over the years is immense. And it is a real shame that he's left us. So yes, really sad. Terrance Dicks has left us at the age of 84. So now would be a good time to go and hunt down a bunch of really cool Target books that he novelized. He's got a really good, for those of you that have not read any of his books that he did for the Target run, he's got a really good way of translating what you saw on screen into page, but also adding just that extra bit more that you don't feel lost or disconnected from the on-screen story. But there's enough in there to flesh out some characters a bit more and things like that. And it's just such a great, like if you're a big fan of some of the stories that he wrote when he was writing for TV, and then you go and read some of the books that he novelized as well, you can tell that they're absolutely linked to those TV stories, but he does so in a way that throws you extra nuggets of info. So you have those moments where you're like, oh, so that's why so and so did that in the TV series, because what we didn't see on the TV story was that this character actually went off and did this and this, and then so they're very, very cool. If you've not read any of his books, the Target range, go and check those out. Really, really cool stuff. But yes, goodbye, Terrance. That's the only bit of news. Bit of a bummer that it's just sad news to go through. There really isn't anything official, nothing from the Beeb about Doctor Who. There has been a couple more rumours which are just complete. It's still a ridiculous thing. when Adam and I were on a few weeks ago for episode 239, we spoke about this ridiculous rumour that Chris Chibnall had thrown his scripts and his clipboard down on set and stormed off and quit the show. And Jodie Whittaker had followed suit because she's had enough as well. And if he's had enough, then I've had enough. And the show was in turmoil. The world's going to end, blah, blah, blah. There's been another bit of rumour that, was it Bradley Walsh or somebody else? I can't remember exactly. Apparently they've had enough as well and they're off. So that just leaves Ryan and Yaz basically doing the show. But there you go. So nothing else other than Chinese whispers going on. But yes, let's get on to a bit of merch, shall we?
Merch corner. Merch corner. Merch corner.
It's a bit rubbish, but it's pretty. It's very pretty.
Well, there you are, young man. What do you think of that now, eh? A Viking helmet.
I know, it's on the telly. It's everywhere.
I don't know whether to be impressed or disgusted. I work in a shop now, here to help.
Season 26 has been announced for Blu-ray release. I am so happy about this one. I thought that the McCoy story was going to be the one announced before the Sixth Doctor, the Colin Baker series. And when it wasn't announced, don't get it wrong, the Colin Baker set does look very cool. But in the back of my mind, because I had heard rumblings around that a McCoy series was going to be announced, I was like, oh man, this is cool news, but I really wanted a McCoy set. And now it's here. It's been announced. It's going to be out in December. And it looks just so good. These Blu-ray box sets, I think, are one of the best things that have come out in the world of Doctor Who merch and just Blu-rays in general over the past, I don't know, year or so, 2 years. Because we often get these announcements where you'll go onto one of the Doctor Who news websites or on Twitter or something, and it will say this really cool box set's been released, and you think, oh, cool, let's have a look. And then it turns out that it's just maybe the Tennant Years has come out in the US with no extra special features, nothing new. It's just a reprint with the same disc and stuff like that. But I really feel like the BBC have gone just all out on these special edition boxes. The artwork is amazing. Lee Binding is just knocking it out the park with all of these covers. And I'm so glad that they've continued this art style throughout each thing, because sometimes, with the exception of the spine that you see on the shelf, they didn't have to stick with the same style, because essentially each box set is the Doctor and it's in like a nice photograph / painterly kind of style, and in the background it's got a really light lilac-y, greeny kind of space scene with rocks and all stuff going on. And then in the front, in front of the Doctor, a bit lower down, you've got a series of other characters that appear throughout that season. And they're all consistent, but Lee Binding has just absolutely nailed every cover. They just look so good, and this is no exception. So released on Monday, the 23rd of December. So what a brilliant Christmas some Doctor Who fans are going to get. If you're a fan of classic Who, and especially the McCoy era, then this is obviously for you. However, if your loved one, husband, wife, girlfriend, whatever, is a McCoy fan, this is going to be the present that's going to nail Christmas. It's so good. So it follows on from the previous, the format from the previous sets and blah, blah, blah. It's got the booklet, it's got all the discs and everything, but it's the special features that really make a difference to these sets, because some of the stories are like redone in HD. Like some of them are properly done. If they've got the source material, then they're redone and rescanned and they look fantastic. The other ones, if they haven't, then of course they're upscaled anyway, so they look a bit better on Blu-ray. And then some of them have had the audio mixes redone. Some of them are in 5.1. Some of them have just been redone anyway, because the guys in the audio team have like rediscovered like newer sources and stuff like that. So these Blu-ray sets mean that you're watching classic Doctor Who in the best format and the best way possible. And I think this box set it's not a big set, so there's not that many stories. So season 26 only comprised really of 4 stories, which is Battlefield, Ghostlight, The Curse of Fenric, and Survival. So Survival being the last ever classic Doctor Who series, not including the TV movie. So Survival's the last one. And because there's only 4 stories, you think, oh, they're going to be a bit light on the ground with content and so on. But no, the special features it looks really good, just like the other box sets really, that have got even more content than this one. And some of the special features are, you've got rare restored extended cuts. So The Curse of Fenric, there's the VHS extended version, and then the DVD special edition on there. For Battlefield, same thing, the VHS extended version and the DVD special edition. You've got 5.1 surround and the isolated scores. So on all the 14 outings for this season, you get 5.1 sound plus all the extended versions of Curse of Fenric and Battlefield. There's that awesome Behind the Sofa. For those of you that have not picked up these sets before, and this is another reason to pick them up, as part of the special features, they do this segment called Behind the Sofa, which is essentially like those of you that know the program Gogglebox. It's essentially you're watching people sat on the sofa watching something, and they're commenting on what they're watching and joking around and so on. And they're really, really good. So this one has got McCoy and Sophie, obviously, but there's also segments that have got Jeanette Fielding, Sarah Sutton, Annika Wills, Jodie Whittaker era writers, Jodie Whittaker's not on there, Jodie Whittaker era writers, Pete Mateague and Joy Wilkinson. So they're going to be really fun and interesting. You've then got this other documentary all about John Nathan Turner. So this is a feature-length look at the life and career of John Nathan Turner, who was producing Doctor Who at this time. And that's also got inclusions from Peter Davison and Colin Baker. You've got The Making of the Curse of Fenric, which is a brand new made for this box set documentary, which has got McCoy, Sophie Eldred, loads of people that starred in the show at the time, plus the people that were making it. So you've got Andrew Cartmel on there, Mark Ayres talking about the audio and stuff. And that also includes unseen behind the scenes stuff and photographs. You've then got this In Conversation, which is another really good special feature that's been on these box sets. It's called In Conversation with Matthew Sweet, where essentially he sits down and chews the fat on this era of Doctor Who and what was happening at the time when they were making it. And this one, it's Matthew Sweet with Sophie Aldred. You've then got the Writers' Room, which all the writers from this season, so Ben Aronovich, Mark Platt, Ian Briggs, Rona Monroe and Andrew Cartmel, they essentially sit down and just discuss their work that they did around season 26. And then you've got Becoming the Destroyer, which is Merrick Anton, who was the guy that did all the prosthetics and all the makeup and everything like that. He goes through a load of that stuff that he did when he was making the show as well. So as you can see, it's got a load of really cool stuff bundled in with it. So I can't wait for this. I think those that have listened to the show, you know that I'm a huge McCoy fan now. It's one of my favourite Doctors, and I think this is going to be an awesome set. So you can pre-order this now from Amazon and probably some other places, zoom.co.uk. I think Zavi have it, and a couple of other places if you don't for somehow find it in stock there or whatever. And they're also doing a showing of The Curse of Fenric, the special edition that's going to be on the upcoming Blu-ray at the BFI, which is also going to have a Q&A with Sophie Aldred and script editor Andrew Cartmel. So that's going to be a BFI showing on, when is that? Saturday the 23rd of November at the BFI. So these events are always really cool. Adam and I try and get to all of these. They're really, really cool events. Just to be sat in the cinema watching classic Doctor Who with loads of other Who fans is really, really cool. And The Curse of Fenric's not a bad one to sit and enjoy either. So there we go. I've waffled on long enough. Season 26, the Blu-ray, is out on the 23rd of December, and you can pre-order that now. Next bit of merch is the Rose Tyler, the Dimension Canon story, is now available to order from Big Finish. So we mentioned this months ago when it was first announced that Billy Piper was going to come back to Big Finish as a solo project, so not with any doctors, so just Rose Tyler doing her thing. And the thing that caught my eye about this one, and you would have heard me mention his name many times on the show before, is that one of the characters from the very first TV episode in 2005, the episode Rose, it featured a character called Clive. Now, Clive has always intrigued me as a character because I felt like personally he was such a massive wasted opportunity in terms of that whole geeky, undercover, nerdy sort of character that I love those within Doctor Who. So Mark Benton, who played Clive, is going to be back for one of these, or two of these stories, should I say. And the reason why I say that it was a wasted opportunity with him, because his screen time was just hardly anything. Essentially, he's the character. So in the episode Rose, when she has that encounter with the Doctor, and then she's trying to track him down and she's doing research, and she comes across this guy called Clive, and I guess he's got an obsession with the Doctor. He's done tons of research over the years, and everything is really cool. He's got this shed out in the garden, and in there he's got tons of filing cabinets, and he's been researching stuff, and he's got paperwork all about the Doctor. And he essentially says to Rose, look, yep, you're not going mad. This person exists. I feel like he's a time traveling. He kind of nails it, really. He's like, he's an alien or something. He's a time traveler. And you're right. He does exist. You're not going crazy. But then that was it. Rose, she does the off. The only time you see Clive again is sadly when he gets killed at the end of the episode. So I feel like he's got such a massive wealth of geekiness that he can contribute to the story. So he is back for a couple of these. Now, the Dimension canon is split into 4 stories. And so it's not just about Clive. There's some other characters as well. So Rose's family is in there as well. You've got Pete Tyler. You've got Jackie. They're back. So the first story is called The Endless Night, and that's written by Jonathan Morris. And the blurb for that one is, as his parallel universe darkens, Pete Tyler has found a chance of survival. Punch a hole through dimensions and someone can jump through and maybe find a way to the Doctor's universe. On her very first trip, Rose visits an Earth that's about to get colder. As a long night begins, Rose meets different versions of her parents and one man who can help her search. His name is Clive. Oh, that sounds so good. And then the next one is The Flood, written by Lisa McMullen. And making another leap with a new companion, Rose finds a world suffering environmental change. The rain won't stop, and the government could be hiding the scale of the impending disaster. While Rose connects with another version of Pete and a strangely compelling young man, Clive meets someone special of his own. In this world, there was no Clive for Caroline to meet, but love can cross dimensions. Number 3 is Ghost Machines by A.K. Benedict. Pete decides it's time he accompanied Rose on one of her dimension jumps, but he couldn't have picked a worse time. They arrive in a world where technology took an extraordinary path and where the recently deceased Pete Tyler has a very different kind of success. As machines start to break down, Pete meets his widow, and he and Rose must confront truths about their family, quote unquote. But they may not escape this Earth alive. Sounds very good. And last one, number 4, is The Last Party on Earth by Matt Fitton. And Rose and Jackie Tyler visit a home very close to the one they left behind, but some old friends are missing and some are unexpectedly present. Rose meets 2 young men she knows should be together. It can sometimes take the end of the world to see what's right in front of you. Meanwhile, the Powell estate faces Armageddon in the only way it can, by throwing a party. So there we go, Rose Tyler, the Dimension canon. Now, you know that Adam and I are big fans of Big Finish anyway, but this one sounds particularly good. And our views on Rose and Rose as a character and a companion aside, the actual stories and some of the sub-characters, or supporting characters, should I say, do sound very intriguing and rather quite good on this one. So you can head over to bigfinish.com, just do a search for The Dimension Canon or do a search for Rose Tyler. You can buy it for $24.99 on CD or $19.99 as a digital download. And that is released at some point in September. So this month at some point you can bag that. And there's a trailer you can listen to as well. So there we go. Rose Tyler back for Big Finish. And lastly, just a little bit more Big Finish news. The Sixth Doctor and Peri will be returning next year for a brand new set of audio adventures. So yes, the Sixth Doctor and Peri are teaming back up, and they're going to release a new, again, Big Finish commonly favour this 4-story to their sets, and this is no exception. So the first one's the Headless Ones. Number 2 is Like. Number 3 is The Vanity Trap. And number 4 is Conflict Theory. So these sound very, very cool, and they've been recording these now, as Big Finish do. They normally record a bunch of stuff quite a bit in advance. So there we go. The box set itself, is called Volume 1, The Sixth Doctor and Peri, Volume 1, and it's called The Rani Elite, split into those 4 stories. So that's very cool. If you're a fan of the Sixth Doctor and Peri, they'll be back for Big Finish next year. We'll have more details on that stuff closer to the launch for that. So that's merch. A few cool pieces there. Particularly excited, as you guys might have guessed, for the season 26 box set, but also those Rose stories. They do sound kind of cool. So there we go. Now, normally at this point in the show, I would hand off to my co-host who would introduce the review story, and then we would crack on with our thoughts on that stuff. But like I said at the beginning, I don't want to just plow through a bunch of stories without hearing Adam's thoughts on stuff. So we're going to park the reviews for now. This week, I've opened up a bit of a Q&A for you guys, seeing as other than meeting you fine peeps at conventions or events and so on, you haven't sent us in any questions in a while. We haven't done this for a while. So let's crack on with the Q&A. I should have got a sound bite ready, shouldn't I? I don't know, a cool little jingle of some sort, but alas, there we go. So first question. This is from Daniel Fox on Instagram. He said, which Doctor Who episode / story do you think you've seen the most times? And I would say the ones I've seen the most times is probably An Unearthly Child. I've seen quite a few. I think I've seen that about 30 times-ish, roughly. It's obviously so many times. Rose, Eccleston's first part. I've seen that loads of times. I've seen Genesis of the Daleks quite a few times, and probably Remembrance of the Daleks. Any long-time listeners will know that I've got a bit of a rocky history with Remembrance and McCoy in general, but my path over the years throughout McCoy's era has led me to watch that story quite a few times. So, yeah, I'll probably say those ones, Daniel. Next, Luke Robinson on Instagram said, what's your fave episode of New and Old Who? This is always difficult. I can never pick. There must be some people out there that can do this, but I just can't. I can't pick just one story as a favourite, because I change my mind over on this all the time. Like if you ask me this question in a month's time or 3 months' time, my answer will likely be different. So I can't really pick one, but I do have a few for you. So from New Doctor Who, some of my fave episodes are Utopia, cracking story. A couple of episodes from Eccleston's era, the story Dalek is really, really good. The story Rose, that's really cool. School Reunion, I love School Reunion. And also, I think the 11th Hour. I think 11th Hour is a really good watch as well. I think just for Matt Smith's just amazing entrance into that role as a cracking watch. So there's a few there for New Who, and then Classic Who. Some faves for me would be Pyramids of Mars, Inferno. Love that story. I haven't watched that in a while, actually. I have to watch that soon. Genesis of the Daleks, Earthshock, and just going against common opinion, which I'm totally cool with, the TV movie. I've just got a soft spot for that one. So thank you very much there, Luke. Dean Jones on Facebook said, what do you want to see from Series 12? In brackets, monsters, character dynamics, etc. Well, Dean, that's a really big question. I think that would be a podcast all by itself, to be honest with you. But just a few things off the top of my head would be, and again, this is going to go against common opinion, again, which I'm totally cool with, but fewer companions. I think the full-on, the 4-person TARDIS team, I think works for a while, but then after that, I think it becomes a bit of a struggle to write a proper part for those characters throughout an entire series. So I think fewer companions. I think if we went back to having 2 companions, that would be great. But I can't see that happening for Series 12 at least. But we'll see, maybe. More time inside the TARDIS if it looked better. And what I mean by that is one of our complaints about the new TARDIS interior, and overall it was cool, but one of our complaints was it looked really dark in there. Like if you think about especially classic Doctor Who and those TARDIS interiors, they were really light and stuff. And I know that the overall side of things starts to change as we get into from McGann's story. So the TV movie, that TARDIS was had some really nice mood lighting and stuff. It was quite dark, and then they continued that theme. So when we jumped into Eccleston's era, had that orangey, dark feel to it with like a bit of blue lighting in there as well. And it's been kind of dark. I mean, I think Matt Smith's TARDIS was actually quite bright at one point. It was a really bright orange and it was really light in there and it felt really cool. But then with Jodie's era, they went back to having it really dark and mysterious and stuff. So if they brightened it up a bit, turned the light on, it would be cool. But also just to spend more time in the TARDIS. I think this series especially, Series 11, I think it was the least amount of time we've spent in a series inside the TARDIS. It'd be nice to go back in there. I'd like to see a bit more inclusion of previous Doctor Who lore into the series. I think that would be good. I think, yeah, the Moff did this with Series 5. It was a case of Russell's era had wrapped up and everything had come full circle with the Doctor saying goodbye to his previous friends and companions. And then it was a really big reset, not in terms of continuity, but reset in terms of new actors, new showrunner, new theme. Everything was different. But one of the things that I wasn't keen on was that they pretty much ignored all of Doctor Who back to 2005. There was hardly any mentions of previous stories, previous companions, all that stuff. They inserted it in there for a bit of fan service now and then, but I just want them to be connected a little bit more. And they did the same thing with Series 11. It was the same thing happened. New actors, showrunners, all that stuff, new design, everything, which is all good. You know, that's part of the show's appeal, and that's part of the show's sort of long-standing, you know, that's why the show's been around for so long, because it has that ability to literally regenerate and come up with a new look and feel and all that stuff. But sometimes I feel like they lose sight of the fact that this is one character. And although it's a different incarnation and a different performance of that character, it is still the same character that's been on a very long journey and so on. And I feel like sometimes we need to incorporate that just a little bit more. And also just to have some better characters for me. Because I think some of the stories from Series 11 and the characters that are in there are just instantly forgettable to me. There's a couple of standouts, but it's only because, like Tim Shaw, but that's only because they slotted him into the finale. So he's in it more than once anyway. But some of the other characters, I mean, some of the historical characters, of course, you're not going to forget them, like Rosa Parks and so on. But a lot of the other characters, like so I was having a conversation with somebody at work the other day. They're not a massive Doctor Who fan, but they had watched Series 11. And they said to me, what was that story with the Trump wannabe? That, you know, they modelled him on Trump. And I literally sat there and thought, I don't know who you're talking about. What story is this? And I said, the guy in the suit and the American, he was bolshy, and they kind of modelled him on a little bit like Trump. And I was like, no, I've got no idea. And then they looked up on their phone, and it was the spider one, Arachnids in the UK. Was it Arachnids in something? Do you see what I mean? I can't even remember the thing. But yeah, so somebody had to look it up and tell me, re-explain the synopsis of the episode, plus the character name, plus the episode title. So that happened a few times throughout Series 11 where things are just instantly forgettable. There isn't that staying power because the characters are not strong enough. They're not written strong enough, in my opinion, anyway. If you think back to some previous series of Doctor Who, like Sally from, is it Sally Nightingale or something like that from Blink? I always remember that character. The cast members in the Family of Blood, always remember those. Clive from Rose. A lot of characters that have been written previously have got staying power. I don't have to look up on Wikipedia their characters and what they were doing and their names and so on. But with Series 11, I find that a lot. So it'd be really cool to have some better writing essentially around the characters. But anyway, hope that answers some of that for you, Dean. Next up, Harry Walker from Facebook. I'm currently rewatching Series 6 and don't think it's all that bad. I was wondering which episode is your favourite from this series. Series 6. That was the one that they split in half, I think, if memory serves, which was weird. And a couple of good ones from, Series 6 isn't the best, is it? From modern Doctor Who. However, it has got a couple of little gems in there. One for me is Night Terrors. I think that's a really cool, creepy story. And the other one, which it doesn't really get reviewed that highly, but I kind of like it still, is The Doctor's Wife, that Neil Gaiman story, where the TARDIS is embodied by, what's the actress's name? I can't remember her name, but that I really, really like that story. And while it wasn't perfect, while there were some bits in there that could have been done better. And I just think the whole concept of having the TARDIS come to life was just amazing. And for me, it was a pretty good story. So yeah, Series 6, not the best, mate, but there are a couple of good ones in there for me. Alex Kingdom on Twitter. Thoughts on Series 11 looking back? Best and worst guest you have met at conventions? So Series 11, just very briefly for me, Alex, just felt very up and down for me. Like we went from 1 week being just really good with episodes like Demons of the Punjab, and then it would go to the next week we would just dive bomb into just very mediocre storytelling and not great character writing. And I think it was definitely an interesting intro into Jodie's era, and I honestly think that Series 12 is going to be the thing that really makes, or I don't want to be too dramatic, but I think Series 12 is going to be the thing that makes or breaks this modern run of Doctor Who. So I think in Series 12 they've really got to stop that inconsistency, because I think one of the things that previous series of Doctor Who have done very well, to a degree, not counting Capaldi's second series, but other than that, Tennant's character was always pretty consistent for the most part. Matt Smith's character was pretty consistent. Same with Chris Eccleston, he was really consistent. I felt like Jodie and some of the other characters were a bit up and down, as well as the overall storytelling as well. However, the series looked fantastic. So all of the new cinematic cameras and lenses and all that stuff that they got in for that, I think it's the best looking Doctor Who. And then for conventions, the best and the worst guest. I think the best guest that I've met at conventions is probably Sylvester McCoy, just because he's completely potty, balmy all the time. He's just always, he's knocking on a bit now, but he always seems to be laughing and joking. We went to, I think it was London Film and Comic Con, not last year, the year before. And we went into this talk that he was doing. And it wasn't anything specific. It was just a talk on his era of Classic Who and so on. But instead of just sitting on the stage and having the panelists just ask questions, he was legging around the whole room. He was walking in between people, sitting next to people. It was like he ate a bucket of Skittles before that talk. And he was just awesome. He was really good. And I think I've met him about 5 or 6 times now. And yeah, he's just a really cool, funny guy. Doesn't ever seem to suffer from convention boredom or anything like that. He's just very, very cool. And the worst guest I've met, and this is a tough one because I hear a lot of horror stories, but me personally, I've not really had that experience where I've come away thinking, oh God, that was a horrible experience. But I think the closest I've come to that is probably, and this is not a Doctor Who, but I met Kenny Baker at a convention quite a few years back. And he was in a bit of a grumpy mood, to be honest with you. I think he was either hungry or something wasn't right with him, but he was just very short and quite grumpy. Didn't really look at anybody for a little while. And so that wasn't the best. I mean, it wasn't terrible. He didn't just ignore anybody. He just came across as a little bit like, I want to be sat in KFC right now, neck in a Zinger tower, rather than signing autographs for you guys. But yeah, so not terrible, but that's probably bordering on the worst experience. TF Productions from Twitter says, if you could recover one missing episode from Doctor Who, what would it be? I think I mentioned this before. The Daleks' Master Plan, I think, would be a cracking story if they found that. Big old chunky one, that. I think it's like 10 parts or 12 parts or something. But I think that would be such a cool sort of progression story and character story for the Daleks. And I just think that would be a real meaty story to get into. But yeah, any others? There's probably a couple, but I think, the Daleks' Master Plan would be a good one. Martin from Twitter says, what do you think about the rumours of David Tennant returning to Doctor Who and the rumours of Jodie leaving next year? Do you think there will be a 60th special? And do you think Torchwood should be brought back? Martin, David Tennant returning. I think if the story is good and the script is good, I think probably Tennant's never shied away from his responsibility as an actor who's played the role of the Doctor. And I think actors who have played that will agree that it is a responsibility. It's not one of those parts where you play the part and then you leave and then that's it. I think there is definitely it stays with you as an actor. I think it stays with you throughout your entire career. You'll always be known as the Doctor, and as an offshoot of that, you get on the convention circuit and all that stuff. And I think David Tennant's a great custodian for the show. He's always positive about it. I've hardly mentioned. I say hardly. I don't think I've ever heard him mention anything negative to do with the show. He's never criticised anybody he's worked with on the show. Never criticised, the whole experience of being the Doctor. So I think if the story is good, I think he'd be up for it, because I just think that outside of him playing the Doctor, I just think he genuinely loves the show, especially the classic years. I think he's just a huge fan still. So I think if the script's good and the story's good enough, and it comes across that it brings a decent impact and a celebration for 60 years, then I think he would. Jodie leaving next year, who knows? That's just I don't know what to say. There's just rumours and Chinese whispers about that stuff. Nobody actually knows other than Jodie and probably Chris and a couple of other people at the BBC. I don't know whether their long-term plan, when Doctor Who was going through the change and Moffat was on the way out and Chibbers jumped on board, and he obviously wants to put his stamp on it and have everything new, just like the Moff did. I have no idea what the contracts were when that was all being set up. So is Jodie on a rolling year by year or series by series contract? I don't know. Or did she sign on for at least 3 series? Who knows? But it's probably not. I probably wouldn't dwell on that stuff too much. If she goes, she goes. If not, then we'll see her for series 13, whenever that might be after series 12. But I really don't know on that one, Martin. Who knows? And possibly Torchwood coming back. So I don't think Torchwood is going to come back. Should it be brought back? I think yes. I think Torchwood has still got a decent bunch of stories in there that should be told outside of Big Finish. I still think that it's got a decent TV run left in it, at least a series. So should it be brought back? I think yes, it should. Will it be brought back? I don't think so. I think the last time that John Barrowman tried to bring it back, I think he went all out and really just went to town on setting up meetings with the execs at the BBC, talking to everybody that he could, rallying up support and really trying to sell it into the BBC that, look, Torchwood has still got legs. Let's bring it back. I think after all that, it's still, he was still met with, you might think so, John, but, unfortunately, no. So I think it's going to run on Big Finish for quite a few years still, but on TV, yeah. I don't think so, Martin. I think Torchwood is gone for TV. I could be wrong, but, I just feel like the TV run is done, unfortunately. I think if John has tried everything he could, and let's face it, out of all of the people involved with Torchwood, not counting Russell T Davies, because he's already said that he's not going to do anything Doctor Who related, outside of him, John Barrowman's your best bet. If you were going to send anyone in to try and sell it and get it back on, he's your guy. And if he can't do it, then, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, mate. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to see Torchwood back anytime soon. RJ, over on Twitter, says, if you could have a multi-Doctor story with 13 and 2 other Doctors, who would you pick? That's a good question. So it has to be, right, okay, so it has to be Jodie and then 2 others. Right, so I had a thought about this the other night. And I think a cool idea would be Paul McGann and Chris Eccleston, because I feel like they're like 2 bookends, aren't they? Now, I mean no disrespect in this whatsoever, but if you take the War Doctor out of the equation just for a second, the McGann and Eccleston are like the 2 bookends, aren't they? So McGann sees out because he's always lumped in with the classic era. So he's like the last Doctor. And like I said, War Doctor out of the equation for a second. McGann's always grouped in with the classic years as the very last story. And then Eccleston is obviously the first Doctor in the new modern Doctor Who. So I think having those 2 Doctors together, just on their own, even if by some crazy miracle, there's like a spin-off, like a one-off spin-off thing where it's McGann and Eccleston, I think that on its own would be amazing. But to pick like a multi-Doctor, like, so is that what you mean? I think that's what you mean, RJ, is like over the years when we've had things like the 50th special, is it the Day of the Doctor? And then previous in classic years, like the 5 Doctors and stuff. So yeah, I think if we in Jodie's era, if she could be joined by 2 Doctors, it would be McGann and Eccleston, because I just think they would have so much good banter together and so much, because they're so different and from 2 different eras. I think bringing those 2 together would be amazing. So yeah, McGann and Eccleston, I think that'd be a really good special to jump into. The Who Society from Twitter said, what's your guilty pleasure Doctor Who story? off the top of my head, I'm going to say Partners in Crime is a good guilty pleasure for me because it's one that always has me and my wife in stitches laughing. I think that story is, while it's not the best story in terms of, Doctor Who, big, adventurous, magical story. It doesn't jump off the shelf as like a modern classic or anything like that. I just think it's got a really good, obviously due to Catherine Tate and stuff, but both her and David Tennant are just so good in that one. And the way that we spend the first half of the episode with those two apart and the near misses and, and then they come together in that hilarious scene. I don't know, and the little adipose, my wife's always like, oh, they're so cute and stuff. And then we're always laughing at the interactions between Donna and stuff. So as a guilty pleasure, that one for me, Partners in Crime. Joe Bowers on Twitter says, which classic enemies would you like to see return to the show? And if you could bring back one classic companion, who would it be and why? I would like to see the Sea Devils back, Joe. I think they're a really cool, really good classic monster. I think that the Sea Devils is a really good story, and Pertwee's. I think it would be great to see another Doctor tackle those guys, because I think Pertwee did an amazing job with that. But I just think a bit of modern treatment and seeing Jodie or whoever in the future tackle them would be really good. And then classic companions. For me, based on the trailer that we've seen for season 26, I want Ace to come back. And that's something I forgot to mention, actually, when I was going through the merch section and I was fanboying over season 26. The BBC put this awesome trailer out. If you've not watched it, go and look it up on YouTube. It's so good. So the first half of the trailer is essentially modern day Ace. And she's kind of taken a little bit of a Sarah Jane Smith vibe where she's kind of doing her own thing in the world. And it looks so good. It's like a modern take on it. Like some of the other trailers that they've released for these classic Who box sets have been fairly run-of-the-mill. Or they've gone down a comedic route, like the Colin Baker series. That was him just dicking around in the courtroom and some of the other characters and stuff. So while that trailer was really good, it felt like it was done on an iPhone and fairly small budget and done in 2 hours. Whereas this one, it's got like this big aerial shot of London and the lighting's amazing. It's got Ace in this really high-end office somewhere and she's looking out across London and it all looks really just beautiful and cinematic, and she's narrating over the top. But she's doing it as Ace. It's like she played Ace yesterday. And then the Doctor turns up because, she's saying that it was amazing, but then he left. But then you hear the TARDIS materialize and you see the question mark umbrella handle going past the frosted glass. And then she's like, wicked. And she's off. So I think based on that trailer alone, I would love to see Ace come back as a companion because she's still got it. She's still, even though she's, and I would never say this to her face, but even though she's knocking on a little bit now, she still looks great for her age. And she's still got that energetic feel about her and her face, like in the trailer when the TARDIS materializes and she turns around and that smile that just beams from her face. She's still got it, I reckon. So I reckon Ace would be great to come back and throw down with the Doctor. So yeah, that would be Ace for me, Joe. Moving on, Seb Ling from Twitter says, if you had to take one episode from series 11, but it's the series 10 TARDIS team instead of 13 Yaz, Graham and Ryan, which episode would it be and why? Crikey, that's a good question. One episode from series 11. Okay, so pick one episode from the recent series, but replace the TARDIS team with series 10. Right. I'm going to say, bloody hell, Seb, this is, you've stumped me with this one for a minute. So series, okay, so let's break this down. So, first of all, the TARDIS team. from series 11. From series 10, sorry. Crikey. I can't even get this question right. So, the TARDIS team from series 10 would be, so the Doctor, Pearl, it's Pearl Mackie and Matt Lucas. So what story would they slot into? I think they could slot into a few of those, really. One episode that I would say would be the Saranga Conundrum. Purely because that episode is so bloody boring. In a nutshell. I just feel like that episode could really do with a bit of Matt Lucas in there. Just to spice that stuff up a little bit. And yeah, I just found the Saranga Conundrum. I was really bored. Like halfway into it, I just thought, when is this story going to come to an end? And like most of the stories from Series 11, it had some good little tidbits in there. But yeah, nothing crazy. But I just think that would be a really good Capaldi story. And to have a little bit of, I think Pearl Mackie as well, she could bring up some of the emotional stuff that Ryan and Yaz, it was offloaded to them. And then Matt Lucas could take over from Graham as the comedic stuff. But I think having Matt Lucas kind of waxing about the Pating as well would be quite funny. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Saranga Conundrum. That's a really good question, Seb. But yeah, the Saranga Conundrum. Thank you very much. Dan Peters over on Twitter says, what's your favourite Doctor Who audio story you've listened to? This is an easy one for me, Dan. It's not the best audio story that I've listened to, but it's the first one that I ever listened to, and it still just hits me with nostalgia and great. The audio production is fantastic, and it's a really old one. It's a McGann story, The Chimes of Midnight, and it's a really good, creepy. It's a really suspenseful and creepy story about the Doctor and what's her name? Forgotten the companion's name in it. Let me look it up while I'm talking about it. The Doctor and the companion arrive at this really old house, and the house has been haunted and has sort of possessed the workers in the house. So the Doctor and Charlotte Pollard, of course, India Fisher. Sorry. So the Doctor, it's basically set around Christmas time, Christmas Eve night, and the Doctor and Charlotte land in the lower basement level of this big stately house where all the servants are. And something is controlling time and controlling all the servants and so on. And essentially time is counting down and down and down to the point where the Doctor and Charlotte might be killed with inside the house or erased from time. And so it's about the Doctor trying to figure out what's going on because for a large part of the story, they feel like it's the people themselves that are, because there's a number of murders that happen. And it's clear that as the story goes on, that it's not these people that are committing it, but the house itself. And is possessing these people and putting them like on a constant loop on every time we get to midnight, time resets and everything goes back to normal. And it sounds weird, but it's a really, really good, excellent story. Very creepy, very suspenseful. Paul McGann is brilliant in it. India Fisher's really good. And the production value is really good, even though it's an old story now. It came out in, crikey, it came out in, I don't even know. It's an old one. It's quite an old story. 2002 it came out, so it's donkey's years old. Oh, donkeys, it's old, but it's a really good one. So that's my one. And the other one, which I think is a classic for a lot of people like this one, is Spare Parts, the Fifth Doctor Peter Davison story. Really, really good sort of Cyberman prequel story. Very, very cool. And again, the production value is really high, and that's quite an old one. But yeah, so The Chimes of Midnight and Spare Parts, Dan. Sammy Satine from Down Under on Twitter says, which is your favourite Doctor Who quote and why? Doctor Who quotes. Let me think. I'm going to have a brain freeze now because you put me on a spot. I can't remember. So the obvious one is the Hartnell speech at the end of his era. So one day I shall come back. Yes. So that was the obvious one. That's an amazing speech. And I can't say that all the way through because I end up choking up. And yeah, so that's amazing. I think the other one is a really cool. I think it's the Family of Blood two-parter of the Tennant era. The young lad, the character, forgotten the character's name, but he does the whole, he's like fire and ice. He's like the night and the storm in the heart of the sun. That whole speech, that's pretty cool. And that's, that's a really good one. But there is one that I can't, there is a really cool, so another really good one for me. I think it's up there. One of my favourites is Matt Smith saying that we're all stories in the end. So that's a really nice little. So when he says we're all stories in the end, just make it a good one. It's like the madman who stole a magic box, and I only borrowed it. I was always going to take it back as well. So that whole speech there, that it's not really a speech, but that's a really nice a cool thing. So the whole, we're all just stories in the end. So just make it a good one. That's really lovely. But yeah, so those three, I would say, Sammy, thank you very much. Luke Malloy on Facebook says, if you had to choose one companion to be sucked through the crack in time so that they never existed at all, who would it be? Crikey, Luke. One companion to be sucked through the crack in time so that they never existed at all. Wowzers. It's gone dark all of a sudden. We've gone darker. I don't think I'm going to pick one, Luke, to be honest with you, dude. I think that's a bit of a... Yeah, I don't think I can... I mean, there are certain companions that I don't think are as good as other companions due to either a combination of the actor themselves and or their performance as their companion. But I wouldn't say that I'd like any of them to be sucked through the crack in time so that they never existed. I wouldn't. Unless I'm reading that wrong. One companion to be sucked through. No, so that they never existed. No, I can't pick one, dude. I don't think I'd want any of them to be gone at all. I think they all have their lendings to each story to a degree, and some of them more than others. But yeah. Maybe what's your answer to that then, Luke? Send over a tweet or something, or Facebook. Let us know what you think on that one. But yeah, I don't want to pick one because they're all, I don't think any of them deserve to be wiped from time and existence. Matt Searson on Facebook says, after watching Series 11 when it was put out, I wasn't happy with it. After starting to watch it again last week, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely grown on me. Have you rewatched it recently? Have any of your opinions changed? If not, will you rewatch it before Series 12 starts? So that's really cool, Matt. I'm glad that you've had a chance to go and rewatch it and it's kind of grown on you and stuff. So that's very cool. To answer your question, no, I have not rewatched it since it went out on TV for two reasons. One is I didn't pick up the box set for it, so I don't actually own it, so I can't watch it anyway. And number two is I just have no, at this moment in time anyway, I just have no interest. I just have no interest in watching them again. And I think somebody else asked a previous question to this earlier on, which was something like looking back on Series 11 and all that stuff. I think just for me, and my opinion is that I just wasn't overly taken with Series 11. And I'm not bashing anything in particular here. This is not an attack on the Chibbers or Jodie or anything like that. I just think as a whole, as a series, it's just not something that, like, there are certain things within television that I will always go back and rewatch all the time. So pretty much the bulk of Doctor Who, not every single series or season or Doctor, but for the most part, I go back and watch plenty of Doctor Who all the time. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that I rewatch all the time as well. So things like Red Dwarf and The X-Files, Batman, the animated series. There are certain things that I'll never tire of. and rewatch all the time. Wurzel Gummidge, loads of things actually that I can't think of at the top of my head. But Series 11 is just not something that I've ever since it went out on TV. I've never once thought I really want to watch Series 11 again. And like I said, this is not an attack or anything. I don't want to get into a whole, why don't you like Series 11 and, and all that stuff. It's just I've never had the inclination to watch it again. And I couldn't if I wanted to, because I don't own it. I haven't picked it up yet. However, I do want to rewatch it before Series 12 goes out. So when we get the announcement for when Series 12 is starting, I'll then pick up the box set and I'll give them a rewatch so that everything in terms of their character, all of the little nuances of their characters and all that stuff is all fresh in my mind going to Series 12. So yeah, to answer your question, no, I haven't rewatched it. My opinion hasn't changed, but I will rewatch it before season 12 goes out. What's next? There's a few more. So Chloe Anderson on Facebook says, in your opinion, from New Doctor Who, what has been the saddest moment? Saddest moment. So there's been two for me. The first one is the ending to the Matt Smith story, Vincent and the Doctor. That always has me bawling like a baby. Actually, not bawling. It always chokes me up and I get teary watching that because it's such a beautiful story anyway. And the ending is so heartbreaking because they realise that after all the good that they tried to do for Vincent, he ended up taking his life anyway. And it's really sad. And that song that they chose at the end when they show him the gallery, the modern gallery of all his paintings and stuff, and he starts tearing up, and that little speech from Bill Nye, his character about it and stuff, it's such a, God, that really hits the emotional part of your heart. Just the heartstrings are pulled very firm on that one. And the other bit, which will always get me, is Tennant's regen. I know it's soppy. I know it's not everyone's favourite, but I've got an emotional attachment to that era of Doctor Who because people who have listened to the show for a long time will have heard me say this a couple of times. But when I got into Doctor Who in the beginning of the Matt Smith era, I stopped a few episodes in and went back and picked up Eccleston's box set, and I started binging that. But I did that over a space of, I'd say, a couple of weeks, watching Eccleston's era, which I loved. And then obviously fell in love with Doctor Who immediately. And then I started to pick up the other box sets as we went through. So I binged all of David Tennant's era in about 4 days. So I was off work for something. I might have just had annual leave or I might have been off sick. I can't remember. But I remember just going through all of David Tennant's run very, very quickly. So for 3 or 4 days, or it might have been 5 days, my life was just David Tennant in Doctor Who. And because I had spent loads of time with his Doctor, a very short amount of time, that's why I class him as my Doctor, quote unquote, because I think the general rule of thumb is the very first episode of Doctor Who that you watched, that Doctor is your Doctor, in quotes. But I can't really label Matt Smith because I don't feel like I have the same emotional attachment to Matt Smith's character as I do to David Tennant. So when we got to the end of David Tennant's run, it was just such an emotional wallop because I had spent so much time with that character and that show that it really hit me hard. And I was literally crying my eyes out. My wife had fallen, I remember it really clearly. My wife had fallen asleep on the sofa next to me. We had the duvet down from upstairs. We was having a bit of a TV binge because she really likes Tennant's character, Tennant's version of the Doctor. And she had fallen asleep. And I was watching it through and tears were just streaming down my face. And like I said, everyone's, got different views on the end of time and stuff. But for me, they're the two saddest moments in Doctor Who. Let's have a look. Joseph Howard on Facebook. What's your worst story from the classic and new series? And also, do you have a monster that you'd like to see again in the new series? Well, I've already answered the monster in the new series before. That's the Sea Devils. I think that'd be very cool. Worst story. from classic and new. Now, this is a bit of a tough one because I don't think any story is, all of Doctor Who is good, relatively speaking. Some of them aren't as good as others, but I think all of Doctor Who is good. I don't think there's been a couple of episodes that I just think, do you know what? If I never see that again, it'll be fine. So from classic Doctor Who, I don't know. I think potentially the Twin Dilemma. That one always just has me, like literally within 5 minutes into the episode, I'm browsing Twitter, looking at Instagram. It just doesn't hold my attention at all, and I'm not really a fan of Colin in that one. So maybe that one. In New Doctor Who, I would say, for me, one that really, I think I gave such a low score was Sleep No More. When did we do Sleep No More? Can't remember. I think I gave it a really, really low score. That particular story, I just thought was incredibly bad. Episode 65. So we did that ages ago. Back in 2015, we reviewed that. And I gave it a 1 out of 10. And Adam gave it a 4.5. So, under average from Adam as well. But I think that's the lowest score I've ever given an episode of Doctor Who. And I think it's because, the story, I don't want to go into it now, but just go back and listen to episode. Go onto the website. All of our shows are on there, or whatever podcast app. Go back to listen to episode 65 if you want to hear Gary just really not happy about Doctor Who at that time. So and the other one I'd probably say would be either the Saranga Conundrum or Kablam from Series 11. Again, just two stories that within 5 or 6 minutes in, I was switched off and not bothered about it. So there we go, Joseph. Next up, Daniel Hickey from Facebook says, which regeneration did you find most heartbreaking? And in New who has had the best speech? So I've answered that one already. Tennant's regeneration, I think, is the most heartbreaking for me. And best speech I've already done. Although I do want to include Capaldi's speech in the Zygon two-parter, when he's got everybody in the war room in the Black Archive. And so I think that particular speech, now that comes to mind, is fantastic. I love that speech when Capaldi delivers that. And then the ones that I mentioned previously. Aidan, I think AidXNH on Instagram says, fave piece of Who merch that you own. I've sold off a lot of my merch over the last year. So I've kept like just a few key things. So I think probably from that stuff, it'd be the Siege Mode TARDIS from Rubbertoe Props. It's a very simple prop. It's not anything amazing, but it just looks fantastic. It's from the Capaldi story Flatline, I think. I could be wrong with that, but it looks really cool. And the other one would be my 10th Doctor's Sonic screwdriver, but it's the TV remote control version. So the reason why I like that is because it feels like a proper prop. The other Sonics that you can buy are like plasticky for obvious reasons. They're toys, but this one just feels more like the components are more quality and stuff like that. So 10th Donna, the 10th Doctor Sonic remote, and the Siege Mode TARDIS. MTR from Twitter says, having seen Dad's Army's missing episodes recently remade, how would you feel if they did the same thing with some of the missing First Doctor stories and David Bradley? I think that would be cool, but it has to be done right. And the reason I say that is because I think David Bradley is really good playing William Hartnell, playing the Doctor. I think he's great as the First Doctor. I think he's got a lot of the mannerisms down, and he nails the vibe of Hartnell in some scenes. So I think he can be very good as the First Doctor. He's very good. But I just feel like the way that he's been written in a couple of. So what was it? The Christmas special with Capaldi. What was that one? The Christmas Story, when it was Capaldi and the First Doctor. I think the way that the First Doctor was written wasn't exactly amazing for that. It was a little bit like, I think a lot of complaints circled around him being quite sexist in that story and that kind of thing. And it just made it made it feel like the Hartnell's Doctor was there for the sake of a plot mechanism rather than like, look, this is the First Doctor. It's more like, and for obvious reasons, it was Capaldi's run at the time, but it felt like it was a Capaldi story with this kind of strange cameo from somebody playing Hartnell's Doctor, instead of it being, this is a 12th Doctor and a First Doctor story, like a proper multi-Doctor story. It felt like Hartnell's Doctor, David Bradley, was in there just as a bit of a plot device and nothing more. So I think, yes, it would be cool. I'd like to see that, but it would have to be done properly and in the right way. But if so, I think it could work. Yeah. Lewis Palmer on Twitter says, in light of the incredibly sad news of Terrance Dicks' passing, what are your favourite stories from Uncle Terrance? Uncle Terrance. Easy one for me, The Five Doctors. Such a good story. And I like a lot of the stuff that he did for the second Doctor story, The War Games. Neil Brighter Moon over on Twitter says, the Tennant era of Who is often regarded as the best era in Who. What do you think made it so special? Good question, Neil. I think it's often regarded as the best era for two reasons. First of all, it's just purely a numbers game to a degree. The Tennant era of Who is when the show had the most amount of people watching it. So for that very reason, you've got more people talking about it and conversing about it than any other era because there are more people watching it. So that's the first one. The second reason is more from a creative standpoint. I just feel like everything was there at the right place at the right time around Tennant's era. I think Chris Eccleston had done a fantastic job bringing the show back in the first place. And that was a brilliant springboard into, right, now that the show's back and we've established that Doctor Who is still very popular and people want to see it. Unfortunately, although Chris isn't here, this other guy, I think, is going to be amazing. So I think a combination of the timing was there. So David Tennant coming into that role at that time was just perfect. Not good for Eccleston, but perfect for David Tennant, because I'd love to have seen Eccleston stay on. But and then it was just the quality of the story writing. I think, yeah, Adam and I have said this so many times on the show when we're talking about the RTD era, is that Russell T Davies and the writers that he brought on board, I just think did such an amazing job of writing great characters and just really good adventures for the Doctor. I think it's just one of those things where they just got the formula down and got that right, and then you've got the great performances to go with it. Some of the companions throughout Tennant's era are really good with Rose and Donna and then you've got the whole Torchwood integration. So you've got Captain Jack in there as well, and the whole Sarah Jane offshoot. I just think that whole era has just got so much good stuff in it. So by the time the Mothball comes round and we've got Matt Smith's era, all of that stuff's gone really. So there's no more Sarah Jane adventures, no more Torchwood. So I mean, it's difficult to kind of put it into a nutshell. But I think it's just magic. I think it was just a magic time that you can't just rebottle magic, all the time. And I think the Tennant era is that. I think it's a magical time of Doctor Who where all the stuff clicked into place nicely, and all the story writing was great, and the characters were good, and some of the themes from Murray Gold were brilliant, and all these things. And then you had Doctor Who at the proms, and it was all out there, and just the marketing and all the merch and all the ranges of toys and stuff. Everything was there in place and rocking and rolling for the most part. And then I think as we've gone through the years, a lot of those things have kind of slipped away and we don't have them as much. So, yeah, I just think the Tennant era is a timing thing more than anything, but also a bit of a numbers game because that's when more people are watching it. But hope that answers your question now. Last few now. Sarah, the Running Hoovian on Instagram says, in light of recent news, your favourite Terrance Dicks story? I've just answered that one, Sarah, the 5 Doctors and the bulk of stuff that he did on the War Games. And there's also a bunch of Target novels that are really good that I can't see on my shelf right now, but I might put them on Twitter or something. A geek named something over on Instagram as well. Who is this? A geek named Aaron over on Instagram says, what is your favourite missing episode that hasn't been animated? That includes recons and audio soundtracks. Missing episode that hasn't been animated. I'd probably say the moon base. I think if I'm answering your question correctly, I think the moon base has got a really good bunch of stuff in there around Cybermen and stuff that would be great to see that we haven't seen yet. So yeah, the moon base and potentially the Dalek Master Plan. I think that would be, when they do finally get around to animating that stuff, it'll be awesome. But I think for now, they're probably my fave missing ones that I'd love to see animated at some point, which I'm sure they'll do. And then lastly, Matt Steele over on Twitter said, if you could pick the next showrunner, who would you pick? When things are back to normal, can you guys do some more commentary shows, in brackets, Empty Child? And number 3, if you could pick anything to change in the show's history, what would it be? Wow. Pick a showrunner. So that's a really difficult question because actually, I'll tell you a good showrunner. Somebody who I think would be a good showrunner is a female writer actually called Sally Wainwright. And Sally Wainwright has written some really good British drama over the years. And I feel like she would be a really good fit for the show. So she's worked on a bunch of stuff. She's been writing since the early 90s. And she's done like her time in like the early sort of soapy kind of days. Like she's done some Emmerdale, some Corrie, some Bad Girls, that sort of thing, like typical week by week soap stuff. But then she also did some really cool stuff. So she did the Canterbury Tales. She's done The Amazing Mrs. Pritchard. She's done Bonkers. What else did she do? Happy Valley, which is a really successful drama that won tons of awards. She's done the recently well-received Gentleman Jack. What else has she done? A little while ago. Yeah. So I think she's got a ton of experience with writing good quality characters. Like I mentioned about the RTD and the Tennant era, why it was so good because the characters were so strong. She's got buckets of writing experience where it comes to characters and just really good drama. So I think Sally Wainwright would be awesome. I think if she came on board and also brought in a ton of good writers as well, that would be a really cool showrunner. Number 2, can we do more commentaries? We'd love to do more commentaries. Adam and I have spoken about this off air before, that it's just a timing thing. We just need to try and nail down a time and we can both get together and record that stuff. So we'll definitely try and do that. We'd love to do that. And yeah, Empty Child would be a great one to sit there and chat about. So yes, we will we'll try and do that, Matt. And then lastly, if you could pick anything to change in the show's history, what would it be? Do you know what? If I could change, there isn't much I would change, because when you change things, this is a bit of a timey-wimey answer, but when you change one thing, even if it's tiny little insignificant thing, that actually has a knock-on effect to everything else. So I probably wouldn't change anything, but I think the only thing I would change is not having Eccleston leave after one series. I think by the end of series 1, by the time we got to the Parting of the Ways, he was just on fire with the Doctor. And it's such a shame that the creative differences were there and his falling outs with Russell and some other people that just made him feel like, do you know what? I kind of like the show and the character, but I can't work like this. You know, I just don't want to do it anymore. It's such a shame that he felt that way towards the end of the series, which is in quite a big contrast to someone like David Tennant, who at the end felt like, I want to leave while I still love it. I don't want it to feel like it's just a chore, like a job. I'm leaving while I still absolutely love the show and love working on it and all that stuff. So it would be amazing. If I could change one thing, it would be that there wasn't any falling outs or creative differences between Chris and the other people, and that he loved it and just stayed on for at least another series, because I think by the end of that, he really settled into his character. And I think he could have gone on to do some really amazing stuff, some amazing stories. So yes, that would be that thing. That would be the thing I would change, is having Eccleston stay on for another series. So that wraps it up for Q&A. Thank you so much, guys, for sending in all of your cues and stuff. I hope I've answered them satisfactorily. And if not, we'll do another Q&A later on in the year when Adam's back, and or actually we'll do another one sort of early next year when potentially Series 12's been and gone, and Doctor Who might be in a different state, and there's lots more relevant questions and stuff. So, but it's been really cool, really fun for me to go through and dig these answers out of my head, which I'm quite proud of, because normally when people ask me questions about Doctor Who, I have an immediate brain freeze. But no, it's been very cool. So thank you so much for taking the time to send in your questions and whatnot. And I think we'll wrap there for 240. Thank you, Who fans, for sticking with me for episode 240. It's been very, very cool to be back behind the microphone doing podcasting and just keeping you guys up to speed with anything that's happening in the world of Doctor Who, really, just to get you through the slow, dark times of not having anything from the BBC at the minute. It's just been a bit barren. So hopefully keeping you guys all Doctor Who'd up, as it were. It's been very cool talking about some merch. Really over the moon about the season 26 Blu-ray box set. Can't wait to get that. Also the Rose story from Big Finish, Dimension Canon. That's very cool. And that we're going to get some Sixth Doctor and Peri stuff next year. All very good stuff. But sad news that we say goodbye to Terrance Dicks. Yeah, it's very, very sad. But now would be a great time to start hunting down some of the Target novels that he did. Very, very good writer for that stuff. So go and check out that. In the meantime, head over to our website, www.bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk. You can listen to all of our previous shows on there. And also look out for us on the social networks, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Just do a search for us on there. Give us a like and a follow. We chat lots of Doctor Who during the week, in between podcast episodes. And remember to subscribe to the show as well. So just do a search for us on iTunes or whatever podcast app you listen to, and give us a sub on there so you don't miss a show when they land on a Friday. And if you could spare a minute for a review, that would be awesome as well, because that really helps. Also check out my co-host channel over on YouTube, The Geek's Handbag. Just do a search for that. You'll find Adam's channel. So many cool videos over there from Adam. Loads of reviews, unboxings, all the good geeky stuff that Adam does. So give him a sub on there. And he's also on the social channels under the same name, The Geek's Handbag. The Geek's Handbag. Just do a search for that. And like I said, we chat Doctor Who and whatnot throughout the week. I will be back next week for episode 241 with either a guest host or myself doing whatever. But until then, have a cracking week. Take care of yourselves. And remember, Allons-y!